So I'm 20 years old, I'm store manager of my own box. My entire job now is pretty much just saving operators money by reducing the stupid. Floor squishes because it's so soaked with cat urine. 50 grand for
Yeah.
a toilet? It's really easy to start hemorrhaging money by just losing
Mhm.
sight of what the controllables are.
Welcome back, investor. We had another episode of Passive Income Adventures with Andy McQuade today, calling in from New York State.
Hi, Emma. How are you?
Hey, Andy, it's your turn to talk now.
Oh, is it already? All right, score.
Maybe I should introduce the show briefly and then we'll turn it over to you.
Sure.
So, if this
Hey,
is your first time listening, we talk about all things passive income from investing. So, the adventures part is the lifestyle design, and the passive income part is how you're going to pay for it. And so, we dive into all of those topics from entrepreneurship and business to career, maximizing your career potential, income potential, finding fulfillment in life, volunteering, all of the above. What adventure do you want to go on, and how can we help you figure out how to pay for it? Sponsored by Rise Capital, where we run a lending fund for people who want to passively invest their money. And you can get a hold of me at partnerwithrise.com/Emma. And Andy is here to talk to us about your journey basically over the last 20 years, 20 plus years of investing in real estate, moving from I don't know what I'm doing to now consulting other operators on figuring out what they're doing and making some big moves in the lifestyle changes you got coming up. Also, the host of the TCO Method podcast. So I'd love to hear about your background. Tell us a little about what led you up to this point, and then we'll let you geek out on being the expert on that.
sure. Thank you. This is awesome.
Yeah, thanks for
We
coming on.
spent like most of the week last week hanging out at Best Ever Conference. So
You've got
met
pictures.
there and the rest. You've got a lot of good pictures, and I've been posting them. I didn't post anything today though. I was very busy getting caught up on everything I didn't do last week. Shocker. So I have spent. Let me think. If we want to rewind back to the beginning,
No, it was a
um,
cold night in 1977, and your mom was
I'm not that old yet, but close. I was born in the '70s, but only by 6 months or so. Yeah. Anyway, I guess my journey in real estate was accidental, definitely not pre-planned. 1997, senior year in high school, applied for summer jobs. That was literally how this whole mess started. I got a call back from the store manager of an 84 Lumber in Syracuse, and he was like, "Come down for an interview." We talked. He hired me part-time, working part-time during the summer, 65, 70-hour weeks, part-time,
Hard
making,
time.
I think, 5.25 an hour is what I started at, but whatever, for somebody in high school, it was like, "All right, cool, let's do this." So I started then. I did that when I was going to college, so I enrolled at Lemoyne for business. I was double majored, marketing, business administration. Actually, it was marketing and management information systems, so
It
computer
was
crap.
it was like, wow, this was a long time ago. What did I major in?
Yeah, no, management information systems.
Oh, exactly. I think my husband has a similar degree, like the
Yeah.
IT version. He did the
That's all it was. It was all hardware, and they were like,
got
"This
it.
is gonna be the job of the future. Everybody's gonna need to do this, blah, blah, blah. It pays this." And then literally, like, within 4 years of when I would have graduated, the jobs went from being like 70K to start to like 30 because there was
Yep.
a glut of students graduating with this degree, and
Mhm.
nobody wanted to hire anybody in that field, which is just as well because I never graduated. So let's get to that.
There you
I'm 19 years old, and the assistant manager of the store I was working at got promoted to be a store manager of his own shop, the next town over. And he calls me out of nowhere and he's, "Hey, so if you go full time, withdraw from school, within 3 months, you can come out here and be my co-manager." Like,
Wait, were you
oh,
already working full time, like 70 hours a week or something?
that was part time. And so what I would do is in the summertime, I would just work as many hours as they would give me.
Okay.
So by the time I was done with my first summer, like I had keys, I was making deposits in the night deposit box. Like the next summer, I was making opening and closing the store, balancing everything out, teaching new people when they came in. I was basically working like I was full time, but I was not. So I would do like nights sometimes. I would do weekends, Saturday, Sunday when we were open. The company shifted from being open on weekends to not being open on weekends during this period of time. And then maybe 20 hours max during the school year. So he calls me, he's like, "Withdraw from school and you'll be full time, but I'll make you a salaried manager within 3 months." Okay. At that point, I was making a big, like whopping 750 an hour. And so I had to take a pay cut to go full time
Mm.
because the starting position as full time was like 625 an hour. And then you do these tests and then you get a raise. So anyway, 3 months later, I'm a co-manager. About a year and a half after that, I had my own store. So I'm 20 years old, I'm store manager of my own box. I got 2 outside sales guys, 7 employees, sitting 5:30 in the morning. I'm at the store, running meetings, doing all the things. And I did that for about a year, turned the store around. It was a store that had been doing like 2 million, brought up to 4 million, fixed a bunch of problems. And then I got a chance to go run an $8 million sales team in Rochester. So I was like, okay, I don't want to be here at 5:30 in the morning anyway. That's fine. Let somebody else do that. So I swapped over. I ran a sales team for them for about a year and a half. One of my sales guys quit. I started selling, took over his portfolio. He had $1 million worth of customers who didn't like him and were super neglected. And I turned it into 2.5 million, and it was a commission sales job. So I was okay. I was actually making as much or more than I was making as a store manager doing sales. And I wasn't opening and closing and balancing and
Yep.
dealing with people issues and all that stuff. And then Home Depot calls me in 2007 and they're like, hey, we're trying to update what we do and how we do it. And we suck at pro, B2B sales, construction, remodeling, all that stuff. So we'd like to hire you to come in and you'll run pro for the Rochester, New York district. I'm like, this is like September of '07. I'm like, okay, I saw the writing on the wall. All my contractors, all my GCs, all my home builders are losing their mind because they see the writing on the wall. Stuff is
Yeah.
about, the wheels are about to fall off. So I'm like, I could move from a commission sales job to a salaried job with
Mhm.
bonuses, no commissions, and run some pro desks in stores. Sure, I'll do that. So I jumped ship starting in September of '07. Actually, when I went to put my 2 weeks in, 84 Lumber walked me out. So that was cool. So I guess I was fired.
Yeah, technically, I don't
I don't know
know.
if it counts. So it was cool because I called the guy at Home Depot and I'm like, hey, Daryl. So they just walked me out. This was on a Monday morning. I'm like, they just walked me out. I'm not going to have 2 weeks. So when can you get me in to start? He's like, I don't know. Let me pull some strings. I started that Friday.
Nice. Yeah, I don't know. Home Depot sometimes seems like it takes a long time to get on board. Did you notice they just barely started taking tap to pay? Just barely, a couple months ago. So, were they that backwards when you got in there?
Oh,
And yeah, okay.
they're still backwards. Let's be clear. Like they never really got good at any of it. We just had to figure out what they were really bad at and avoid it. And so that was a lot of my job. So I went from 7 stores in '07. We picked up 2 more a couple of years later because they collapsed a bunch of districts during the reorganization to make the company actually profitable because they were trying to undo all the damage Bob Nardelli did. Oh, did I say that out loud?
No, yeah, we're just gonna edit that
Oop.
part. No.
So they were trying to undo all the damage that Bob Nardelli did.
That's okay.
And
He can't sue me. He can sue you, but not me.
that's fine on
There you
'em.
go.
The next phase, I got 18 stores around 2015,
Mhm.
and Home Depot's never really like, everybody buys from Home Depot, not everybody likes Home Depot, like, it's love or hate, but everybody buys there. Even if they hate buying there, they don't have a choice sometimes, so it happens, right? They spend money, they don't wanna spend money, but they're spending money. So there's no such thing as a cold call for me, which
Okay.
spoiled me like crazy. Part of my job as well as having these teen stores and these pro desks was to deal with large commercial accounts that were buying from Home Depot. So when I started in '07, like a large account for Home Depot was probably like 50 to 75,000 a year in spend. And when I left, I couldn't talk to anybody who was spending less than a quarter of a million a year,
Yeah.
which is fine. And it was just like concierging, right? Hey, we can do this program, we can do that, sign up, blah, blah, blah. Like it wasn't super dedicated account management. They would still buy all their stuff from the stores, maintain that relationship, et cetera. But around 2015, I started going after much trial and error. We started going after a lot of the larger commercial multifamily operators because lo and behold, I look at the customers spending the most money and they're property managers and big operators of
Mhm.
apartment communities. And I'm like, wow, this is weird. I wonder why that is. Now, partially it was because of my location, because being in Rochester, New York, I just happen to have 3 or 4 players with either multiple millions of square feet of commercial space under management or 20 to 40,000 doors under management. So it was went hand in hand and we just started working with those guys and learning what we could do and what we couldn't do. I had one client that would buy over $1 million of one type of flooring in one color to the point where I had to pre-plan for the company, for
Yeah.
Home Depot as a whole. I had to send the orders in 12 to 16 weeks ahead of time to Atlanta in order to make sure we had the product on ground to supply the client with that specific SKU. It was dumb, but we did it. And we started building all these crazy one-off programs to give these clients value. I ended up building a relationship with 2 or 3 of these operators. They were family offices, right? They're not publicly traded. They're family in the top 3 or 4 positions in the company, hiring a bunch of other employees, but they're family businesses,
Mhm.
and built relationships with them, and they taught me why they did things that they did, and then I figured out how I could actually sell them stuff without making them want to kill me 5 times a week for all the things that would go wrong at the stores. So it was very selfish on my end. Like, I tried to figure out how to provide them with products that we could actually do well and that didn't fall apart, so I didn't get a call later saying, "Why did you sell me this? It's a piece of garbage." And once I figured that out, the rest is sort of history from there. I was working with a VP of construction for a large family office based out of Jersey, actually, but they had projects here. And we were on a plane together to Michigan and to North and South Carolina, Virginia, like all over the freaking country as they expanded their territory and added stuff. They're spending between 5 and 6 million a year with me. And it was like 2.5 million in appliances, just crazy quantities of stuff as they rehab these units and did their value add plan and moved. So great for me. I learned the business. Great for them. I saved them a ton of money. But I also learned what they did and why on these value add rehabs. And I started finding ways and stealing all these ideas from different operators that eventually turned into the TCO method. So it's my podcast, but it's also like a consulting framework that I created. So it basically focuses on low maintenance, low overhead, long life. So it reduces the number of times you have to turn a unit, complex rehab stuff, and hopefully reduces the bills and electricity and all the other stuff. And a lot of it was just I stole it from my other clients. Client A is doing this with this particular toilet or this light fixture or this flooring or this type of paint or whatever, you name it. And this is why they're doing it, because it saves them money over time, or it's less maintenance over time, which saves them money over time, or it's less this, less that. But it all paid off for them in the long run. And eventually I got to the point where I was just walking into these multifamily operators and being like, oh, yeah, company X does this and company Y does that and company Z does this. And you should be using these same products from me because this is what we can do for you. And it ended up now I don't sell products. Now I just teach people how to do it. And they can listen to the podcast or they can hire me or whatever. But the long and short of it is that my entire job now is pretty much just saving operators money by reducing the stupid, which is a fun job, honestly. It really is. I see it as people lighting money on fire, right?
Yeah.
Because I've seen it enough times where they just do the same things over and over again without thinking about it, and then you explain to them why they're lighting money on fire and a light bulb goes off. And for me, it's nice because it makes me think I'm not insane, because as far as I know, I'm the only one out here doing this. But it also makes me feel good because I'm helping them provide a better product for whoever their residents, tenants, whatever you want to call them, may be.
Mhm.
And then I'm also saving them money, which hopefully means that there's more money going into their employees' pockets, their investors' pockets. So for me, it's like a little bit of give back, a little bit of education. And at this point, I've grown up in the industry. So it keeps me in touch with operators who are actually doing things and making things happen and being super active. And it's not just tire kickers, right? It's fun, it's different. And then I help run a couple different RIAs locally. I help run one here locally, one down in Knoxville, Tennessee, which is where we want to settle. I do some hard money lending that I started doing. Friends that are part of a storage group reached out to me and they're like, "Hey, you've got money." Yeah, I do.
That's how that phone call always starts. I just call people, I'm like, "You got money, right?" They're like, "What do you want?"
Yeah, that's how it went. And then it was like, yeah. They're like, "Will you loan it to us?" I said, "Sure, first position." They're like, "Okay, we can do that. We'll write a mortgage." I'm like, "Okay, let's figure this out and see how it goes." So I've been doing that for a few years, and that's nice, right? I use some IRA money, self-directed stuff, some
Mhm.
Roth money, HSA money. You can partner all those things together. You can mix it with regular capital as long as your accountant is really good and
Yeah.
to the penny on all that. But it's doable. Like, it's totally doable. Yeah, it's been a learning curve on that side of it. Just I've never lost money, knock on wood, but it's been educational to say the least with the amount of hoops you got to jump through for some of it.
Yeah, lending definitely has its own set of rules, which is why we do lending in our fund, is because we found that if you can write a big enough check, you can be in first lien position. But if you can't write a big enough check, then you're either doing second lien or you're just out of the game in general. So we wanted to democratize that or lower the barrier of entry by allowing small checks in, and then we go fund the whole deal as a fund. Because the bigger check you can write, the better terms you can get.
Mhm.
You can dictate the tone of that relationship with your borrower. But that's not the meat and potatoes of your current income. You're using mostly IRA money to do that. So that's more of your retirement income, which
Right.
is goodness, before you're 59 and a half, you got quite a number of years before you can tap into any of that. So what are you doing right now to, I hate to say it this way, keep the lights on because you're past that point about worrying about how to keep the lights on. But run down for me your multiple streams of income, however much you feel comfortable sharing.
Yeah.
Because I think that one of the things I teach a lot on the show is diversification, which is multiple streams of income. You've got to be able to have ways to keep your lights on, you've got to have ways to grow, and you've got to have ways to support yourself when you're no longer able to work either at all or not as much.
Yeah. So there's a few. My wife does work a W-2. She's senior at a insurance brokerage, and they do, like, life and annuities and that kinda stuff.
Mhm.
It was an ESOP, which is an employee-owned company, and they got bought by AmeriLife, and so she was paid out for her ownership stakes in that, so we use some of that for investing as well, which is
Okay.
handy. But she still works a
Smart
W-2.
people do. You take those windfalls and you invest them.
You
That's
absolutely do,
lifestyle
which is
cheap.
exactly what we're doing,
Yep.
and but she covers our health insurance. So we have that. I do consulting in a couple different ways. I work with large multifamily operators. I opened a company in 2019, actually. So I left Home Depot for a year. There was a little blip there that I skipped over. In 2018, I left Home Depot because they gave me a 30% increase on what I had to do for my sales projections. I was doing 22 million a year at the time, which is equivalent to a small store,
Mhm.
and they gave a guy that was doing 2 million a year a 10% increase. I was like, okay, I'm not going to bonus as heavily. So you just gave me a pay cut. So you're going to give me that pay cut up front for the extra work I have to do.
Yeah.
And they were like, yeah, sorry, wage compression. And I went, yeah, sorry, I quit.
Yeah. That okay,
And
but that what you just described right there, it's not just the fact that your wife has a job that's keeping the lights on and growing. It's the fact that you have other things that you're doing and you've learned the business. So you're diversifying your knowledge stream that allows you to diversify your income stream. So when stuff like that happens, it's almost like you're the reverse layoff situation that something happens at work that now makes you hate your job. You didn't hate your job before, but suddenly there was a change and now you hate your job. It happens a lot of times in well, in acquisitions like we just talked about with your wife. It's like things change. I know my husband's been laid off when they've had a merger, and then everybody's chicken with their head cut off trying to merge systems. And next thing you know, in the smaller company, everybody gets laid off. And so things like that, you could have a great job that you love, but if you're not prepared for them to change the terms on you, then you're stuck doing what that boss tells you to do. So I just really want to point that out because it's so key in what we teach our investors. It's like we're not talking about private jets, maybe not yet, but we're talking about just not being trapped in a job that could turn on you at any moment.
oh, yeah. And it took me about 45 days to find a new job. Like I didn't quit and walk out. I just
Yeah.
said, okay, cool, and then kept working while I
Uh-huh.
was interviewing for other jobs. So, I actually found a director of sales position running some stuff, and they found me. They called me, like, "Hey, would you be interested in doing this? We saw that you're looking." "Okay, sure, let's do it." So I interviewed, got the job. I was running for a building materials manufacturer. I was doing sales team management
Okay.
in, like, Canada and Japan and across the US. They did really high-end stuff, so I went there in the spring of 2018, was there for 1 year on the nose, and here's why. So we were doing cool projects, right? Like Harvard, Facebook,
Mhm.
Amazon Blink, like we're putting products into their offices. We were doing all these really cool build outs, super high-end custom homes all over the country, like big projects, which I enjoy personally. Like all my best projects have been like mixed use renos and stuff like that.
Mhm.
So for me, this was not new. What was new was having salespeople going in and calling on architects and designers as opposed to being in the dirt with people, which, whatever, that's fine. I had a large family office that I used to sell to at Depot, and they actually called one of the VPs, got a job he switched from shared services to procurement and risk management as one bucket. He calls me, he goes, "Hey, you know everything we do and where we buy and why we buy it. And we do all this stuff with Home Depot, but the new guy's no help.
Mhm.
And I want to go to coffee. So you got time?" Sure. So we went, it was like February of 2019, and a half hour coffee turned into a 3.5 hour long conversation where he's like, "Why don't you just do this full time? Like, why are you not out working for yourself telling people how to do this?" I'm like, "I don't know. Should
Yeah.
I do that?" He's like, "You should do that and we'll hire you." And I went, "Oh, yeah, okay." So I opened an LLC a couple weeks after that, spent a couple months getting insurance and having a contract written. And then my 1 year anniversary came up for that job, and the boss happened to be in town 2 weeks before my anniversary date. I was like, "Oh, this is convenient. So I'll go in and quit." And he was like, "You can leave." I've been fired twice.
Yeah.
I started actually calling around at that point, just letting everybody know that I was a free agent, and the rest is history. That was March. Let's see, I opened the company in March of 2019, and I started doing this full time like May 1st.
Okay. All right. So right there, I don't know. Full time. Is this like the same definition of working a zillion hours part time? It's like the opposite of that.
Full
Uh,
time would be me just working for myself for as many hours a week as I felt like. It's hours some weeks for the whole week, 40 hours some weeks if something had to get done and I was boots on the ground to do it. So it just varies. You
yeah.
pick your battles. Sometimes things have to get done. So I did that. The pandemic hit, which I actually had to give a $40,000 check back to a client because it was February, or I think we signed the contract and got the money in January, and then February came and all the flights were canceled. I was literally supposed to fly out to Chicago the following week to walk properties. Obviously, that wasn't happening. So we just canceled that entire job and went back to square one. And I was like, oh, what the hell am I going to do if I can't walk properties and I can't meet people? Like, I can do the Zoom thing and I can do this or the other thing, but they can't get into properties. They can't do work. They can't get into units. They can't do this. They can't do that. So why do they need me? Guess what? They didn't want to pay me because
Hmm.
I couldn't help them with stuff because they weren't buying stuff. Everything stopped. So that's when I was, oh, what else can I do? So I actually, this is not my first like consulting thing. I started looking into consulting when I had a bad boss at Depot around 2011.
Mm.
So my first book on consulting went on my shelf in 2011, and I never really stopped looking at that, which is how it came to be when he was like, "Why aren't you doing this full time?" I was like, "Oh, I can actually do that." So I started doing consulting for other consultants. So there's all these expert network websites that you can sign up for, and they vet you based on your experience level, on your career path, on your seniority level, blah, blah, blah. Like you send them a resume or a CV, all the background information. You got to fill out all this crap. They research you, they pull a background check, and then if are who you say you are, you get into these expert networks. And at one point, there's probably 25 of them out there. And I got into the biggest ones that were doing contracts and work for Bain, Boston Consulting Group, LEK, which is a big building materials consultancy that nobody knows. A lot, you name it, like any of the big consultancies, the big three, the big four, these
Hmm.
guys were doing jobs. And so I would get to talk about building materials and other stuff. And it was like, I think when I started it, I was getting like $200 an hour. And by the time
Hmm.
I was done with it a few years later, and as I stopped doing it about 2 years ago, I got too busy. I was getting about $400 an hour just to talk for an hour, a couple times a week. Each one would give me a couple projects a month. So it was like beer money, but it was still a couple grand a month. It was all right. It wasn't
Yeah.
terrible.
That's a lot of
Um,
beer money.
yeah,
You're not
I
drinking
like
all that.
this. I like expensive beer. So,
Which is
you know,
which is why I had to give you a ride home last week.
oh, that's untrue. I didn't even drink when we were there.
I know you weren't even drinking, but okay, so I like doing these podcasts because I get a chance to ask questions for purely selfish reasons. I was interviewing somebody recently and he was talking about how he got invested very young and with very little amounts of money. And I was like, "Hey, I should ask him all the questions that my kids would ask him." And so you're saying some stuff that's I know we were chatting a little bit about this last week on the consulting side of things. So we have a lot of people listening who are experts at the thing that they are doing. Now, whether it's real estate or not, I think one of the things that we talk a lot about on the show is entrepreneurship, how to make more money, career maximization, so that you have more money to invest, all of these kinds of things. So, what you're saying, I remember, like, I grew up in Seattle. Everybody in my family worked for Boeing. My in-laws, my siblings, all Boeing. And they'd be like, I work for Boeing. I work for Boeing. I'm like, what do you do for Boeing? And like, they farm me out to other companies as a consultant. I just didn't know that was a thing. Is that kind of what you're talking about?
Yeah, so they would have a project that another company would hire them for. So, like a
Hmm.
Fortune 500 company would hire Bain, let's say, as an
Okay.
example, and then they would want to do a project. And there's all these rules and regulations. Like there's all these SEC regs
Yep.
because they're talking about publicly traded companies and
Mhm.
can't deal insider information. And you can't do this and you can't do that. You got all these disclosures, insurance, blah, blah, blah. It's a job. It is a professional thing. Like they're not going to let you in if you don't have all these boxes checked and don't
Mhm.
agree to never discuss whatever's going on. They would bring in other consultants to teach either their consultants or to answer questions for their clients that their clients wanted to know about without breaching any of the code of conduct,
Yeah.
insider information, insider trading, blah, blah,
Okay.
blah stuff. So I would talk about like building materials distribution, building materials manufacturing, like how doors are assembled, like just stuff that people who were not in the industry wouldn't know,
Okay.
and I would help them figure out how to do things better. So they wouldn't tell me what the details were of what they were working on, or just say, "Hey, we wanna know about this process in
Mhm.
building materials distribution," or "How does this product get from point A to point Z?" Or I even did some investor calls for a couple of big global investment banks. Like, I had 3 different investment banks out of Sydney, Australia, that during the pandemic would call me, and I would get on their investor calls to talk about specifically Reliance brands, which was like Sharkbite and stuff like that, and James
Mhm.
Hardie, which because
We
they're
do
both
so many
Australian,
shark bites.
they're both Australian, New Zealand home companies,
Okay.
right? They have American divisions, but they're
Okay.
based in Australia. So I would get on a Zoom like we're doing currently, but this is a much better system than Zoom ever could hope to be. And at
It's
least for podcasts.
StreamYard. I don't think I've ever said that I can record using StreamYard for anybody out there wondering. We've tried them
StreamYard's
all.
pretty cool.
We've tried
Plus,
them all.
unlike Zoom, they don't claim ownership of your IP when you record on there.
Yeah. There are a lot of reasons that we use StreamYard. I don't want to get too far off topic, but we've tried Riverside, Squadcast, we've tried local recordings, Google Meet, Zoom, and we just keep coming back to StreamYard. I don't know if you want to start a podcast out there, maybe you should just start with StreamYard. Just saying.
Me,
Where were we? I got you
I don't
totally off okay, so
You're
you have
fine.
a
You're good.
Zoom with people, overseas and talking
Overseas,
about
I was getting
building.
on at 9 o'clock at night, sometimes 8 o'clock,
Okay.
trying to be completely functional talking to investors where it's 8 in the morning, 9 in the
Yeah.
morning for them, and I'm trying to be, like, on the ball, super intelligent, sounding like I know what the F I'm talking about the real estate market, construction demand, new products coming out from these vendors in the States, how it's gonna impact their stock share price so they can decide whether or not they're gonna invest. Like, cool, sounds great. Sucked. Met some great people, like, some of the people I used to do that for at UBS in Sydney, awesome guys, but not something I'm interested in doing anymore. Like I
Yeah,
said,
but
I
it's
stopped
kinda
doing all
like
that stuff around 2022.
when they say when you're hiring a contractor, how do you hire a good contractor? Have you heard this one?
Hmm?
You should hire 3 bad ones first, and then you'll find a good one. So sometimes you just have to do some stuff to just see what you think about it. I don't think it's chasing shiny objects. I think it's taking advantage of opportunities and see where it goes, and then you get to the point where you know what you like and you know what you don't like, and you can be very clear on your boundaries, but so it takes some experience to get there.
It
So it
does.
sounds like you hit on your little magic combination of jobs you like, jobs you don't like. What I mean, because 'cause I've had jobs that I don't like doing, but I did them because they paid really well, and then you get to the point where you're like, "Okay, no money is green enough to get me to do that job anymore." And so you have to just whittle it down. So describe to me what that looks like in the present day.
So, currently, pretty much the only thing I spend time on is I help commercial property management owner operators, even some smaller, honestly, some residential guys,
Mhm.
figure out how to make more money at their properties. Now,
Okay.
it could be a process thing. It could be they're doing a complex reno and they want to look at what the total cost of ownership is going to be. So that's a little bit more involved because we have to plan out what they're going to use, where they're going to use it, why they're going to use it, justify the extra expense up front to use some of the stuff. Not all of it, but some of it's more expensive up
Yeah.
front,
Buy
and
once,
then
try
build
once.
out the plan.
Nope.
So a little bit of that, but also if I'm talking to somebody who's doing a flip and they plan to not own the property in 2 years, I know it hasn't gone as planned for many over the last couple of years. They wanted to be out of it in 2 years, and guess what? They can't
Yeah.
get what they think the property's worth, or they've overspent, they're over leveraged, they're
Mhm.
stuck. It is what it is. If they're going to flip it and it's a 2 year plan, then stuff that's going to last 5 to 7 years, why pay the premium if it's not going to be their problem anymore? So there's a little bit of good Samaritan. I want to do the right thing and I want to help somebody out and pass it on. By the same token, there's a financial factor that comes in for most of the people where I'm not going to keep this thing past 36 months. I'm not going to have this thing for 5 to 7 years or 10 years or for forever. So I'm just done. And I'm just not going to spend the extra money on
Mhm.
these things because it's not going to impact NOI or help me get more value for this property when I own it. So most of the stuff I figured out to suggest is about a 24 to 36-month payoff when you
Okay.
look at the extra you're going to spend up front and then getting the ROI on that over
Mhm.
time. Some of it, a vast majority, is built to just minimize the amount of touches that happen, right? So you look at all of the stuff that happens in a residential apartment complex,
Mhm.
all of the lowest common denominator. I hate using that term, but that's really what it is. The worst tenant you could ever possibly have, what are they going to do to that property?
Let
Are they going to
their
have,
dogs poop inside the house for a year because they never take their dogs outside. How about that one?
you got it. Yes. I've
Not
been
that's
there,
ever
done
happened
that.
to me.
I don't believe you at all.
It's
I don't
oddly
believe you at all.
specific. Eh,
Yes, indeed. Or like you have the floor where you walk in to the house and the floor squishes because it's so soaked with cat urine and it's actually eaten into the joists and the
yeah,
entire house smells of ammonia.
I've done that.
Been there, done that. Yeah, so there's stuff you can do to avoid that. A perfect example. You use smoke detectors. You're required to use smoke detectors. And prior to this most recent change that they just passed in a law with this whole UL 217 thing, smoke detectors used to have a 10-year useful life. Didn't matter whether they were battery operated or 10-year sealed lithium, the 9 volts, the hardwired units, they all had a 10-year life
Mhm.
because they used a radioactive disc to detect smoke. Now they're using photocells. It's a recent change within the last year. Very hard to find ion anymore. But all these old smoke detectors that you push the button and it beeps, right? Shows it's working, tests the battery, does all that stuff. Cool, but it really only actually proves that the
Battery
button
works.
works
Yeah.
and that the battery's good. If there's a fire, it may not go off. And then you, as the property owner, are stuck holding the bag because you had a 20 or 25-year-old smoke detector in there that probably hasn't worked in 10 or 15 years.
Okay.
So, is your insurance going to put the screws to you for that or not?
Maybe.
It's possible. Would I consider it part of risk management to eliminate that? Yes, I
Yeah.
think I would. But these new units, they all come with photocell. So now you don't have to worry about the radioactive isotope, but you still have to worry about the overall quality and lifespan of the unit still
Mhm.
functioning. Nobody blows
Right.
them out. Nobody vacuums them. Nobody does what they're supposed to do with them. So you're still looking at throwing them away every 10 years. It doesn't
Okay.
matter what your reasoning is. They cost you money. You put a battery operated thing in and you're paying one of your guys every 6 months or every year to go in,
Around to
change the
recharge
battery,
batteries.
test it. Do they clean them? Absolutely not. They do not clean them. Do they
Yeah.
pull them down and blow them out with
No.
compressed air? Absolutely, they do not. I've never seen it once in 20 years of walking properties. I've never seen one of those ever get taken down and cleaned properly. So you're basically stuck with doing maintenance you don't need to do because you wanted to save $5 on a smoke detector. It's not going to work out long term for you. Like, it just doesn't make sense. Same thing, like, people will yell at me because I really hate electronic door locks because the technology isn't there yet. Like, it makes some things easier, but from a total cost of ownership
Yeah.
standpoint, the warranty sucks. If they're Bluetooth or Wi-Fi connected, the batteries die every quarter. You're constantly maintaining them. There's
Yep.
no warranty on the electronics. If they don't have a key backup, you're stuck trying to drill the lock out every time the battery dies and you can't get in the unit because the tenant locked themselves out or whatever.
Yeah.
It's a nightmare of extra costs that most
Mhm.
people don't really need, but there's certain properties where it's expected to have some sort of modern technology, and that's fine. But for a C property, C class property, D
Mm-mm.
property,
We
inner
never
city
do.
stuff, it's a
Never do.
lifetime warranty, keyed lock. You don't have to pay a locksmith to do master keying and all of their stuff. There's systems out there you can use to cut that out. But it's
Mhm.
all about pick your battles and pick stuff that has the least chance of costing you money on labor calls. Because it's not the $30 lock set or the $15 smoke detector that costs you. It's the labor to go fix it. It's if you have a toilet with a flapper and the flapper starts leaking, two things happen. The tenant calls and says, my flapper leaking. And then you're paying a guy labor to go out there, verify, go back, buy parts or bring parts or do whatever. By the time he's all said and done, you've got 2 or 3 hours of labor, which is a couple $100 probably for $100 toilet, where you
Mhm.
could have spent 120 on a toilet and then never gotten that
You're
call. And the
right.
other thing that could happen is the tenant doesn't call you and then the toilet runs constantly and you get a big fat water bill and a big fat sewer
Yeah.
bill because you've used a couple thousand extra gallons of water in that period of time.
Yeah, and they don't
So
call because they don't want you to know that they're growing cannabis. They don't want you to know that they have 8 dogs or that their cousin has been living there for the last 8 months. They don't call, and that's the biggest issue, so we don't catch that stuff until we're doing our inspections, but I don't know. We have consultants who come in and they're like, "Oh, we're gonna do an energy savings audit," and they send us a list of the low flow shower heads, the aerators, and the flapperless toilets. I'm like, "Really? This is what it was? Like 3 products that we're gonna install in all of our units?" It's not really consulting, so that's why I was intrigued by what you were talking about because we were talking about, like, when we switched over to LED light fixtures, the light bulbs never go out, but now every time that we lose a light, we have to pay somebody to go in there and install a new fixture, and so there are trade-offs that you have to consider, and that this kind of stuff, it adds up. I don't think that it covers up for a bad deal, like, you have bad insurance, you have a bad loan, your property taxes are out of control, like, those are the 3 biggest expenses, but as long as those are in line and well managed, then all of these other things, they can add up to either top line revenue or lowering your expense ratio if you
or
do it
both.
right. But most people
The
think
ideal is
about it.
both.
Yeah.
Right. And nobody does because they don't. For me, a lot of it was very, like I said, I learned it through very selfish means. I didn't want to have to deal with the calls and the headaches if something went
Yes.
sideways later. So for me, it made sense to recommend those things. Like now, I don't sell anything, right? I'm not
Mhm.
out there like these. I laugh because you mentioned the green up
Yeah.
consultants, but they're selling the program. So they're not
Mhm.
really consulting, they're selling,
Yep.
right? Because they're selling the service. You'll probably be annoyed, but like most municipalities that I've been to have some sort of something set up with their state and through the municipality or the local water authority or local power authority where they'll do all that stuff for free
Uh-huh. Yeah. It's, "Wait a
as
second, we
opposed
have a
to paying
rebate. That's
as opposed to
exactly what
paying.
to put in there."
I've seen somebody that I follow on LinkedIn who was like, "We paid a consultant $50,000 to come in and tell us to change all of our toilets, and here's all the NOI it generated."
Why'd you pay for
Dude,
that?
I include that in my base level report for like 2,500 bucks. You paid somebody 50 grand. I am very underpriced.
Yeah. Yeah.
Why would you admit to that? Number
Mhm.
1, but number 2, 50 grand for a
Yeah.
toilet just
I
to
don't
tell
care
them to
how
use
much
a different
NOI.
toilet? Oh my
It's
god.
pennies. It's pennies by comparison. What's the
The
ROI on
lubricant.
that is what I wanna know. They tell you what happens with their NOI, but you're like, "How long is it gonna take you to break even on that consulting fee?" But your consulting range is okay. We consult based on, like, the DIY guys. They're gonna pay us a small fee. We're gonna put together a little advice packet for them, and then they're gonna go implement. All the way up to, "We're gonna do it with you," to, "We do it for you." So is that the same way that you structure your consulting?
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
So they can start with just that list, or I'll walk the property with them, give them
Mhm.
some ideas during due diligence of what they need to watch for, budget items. At that point, like in a
Mhm.
little bit of operations, we'll start touching on certain things like, hey, if you do this, you're going to have less maintenance. So it's all
Mhm.
about the payoff is on the labor, the payoff is on the utilities, the payoff
Okay.
is on the headaches and the replacement. Oh, and if you're going to hold this thing to the next time you need to do a complex rehab, guess what? Then instead of doing a complex rehab in 5 or 6 years, maybe some of the stuff we do, if you have the good tenants and everything is done right and you actually don't defer maintenance and you do what you're supposed to do and address issues, maybe you can stretch that to 7 to 10 years.
Mhm.
Right. For a lot of people, they're not holding for 7 to 10 years, so that doesn't necessarily mean anything to them. Like, it's attractive because maybe less maintenance means less headaches, less calls, more NOI, but for other people, that's not a needle mover. Like, they don't care that much. So, it's very much based on total cost of ownership. How long you own the asset is the primary calculus that you
Right.
use to get the payoff. So, ROI wise, I'll do everything from giving them a simple list and walking with them and pointing out things that I think they need to address, from risk management, from this is going to be a problem. Let me help you find some vendors that have grant money so that you can do shower heads and aerators and low flow toilets and thermostats for free. They'll come and they'll do it all for nothing. Or you'll just buy the toilets and they'll do all the rest for free, or whatever, right? Any combination there, and I've seen it all.
Yeah.
And then the next step is, okay, I'll help you build all of your specs, right? I will help you decide what products can be substituted, which ones can't. Like, we'll make this chart: product A, product B, use this, don't allow substitutions. The rest of it doesn't matter. Here's the goal. Here's what your payoff will be. Here's why. Help them figure out where to supply the product from, shop it for them sometimes. And
Mhm.
then I can negotiate with vendors for them because 22 years, senior leadership, territory management, all that fun stuff. I know how they buy the product, how they sign their contracts, how they negotiate their pricing, what their lead times are, how they pay their salespeople. Like, all the things that go into a calculus of what kind of margin these companies make can be leveraged. So the average company is paying somewhere between 15 and 25% more than they should be for products because
Mhm.
of various choices they've made internally, right? They're not leveraging rebates, they're not leveraging upfront discounts, they're not buying in bulk. Maybe they're allowing an automated purchasing system, right? Like, they have a portal on their website that they have internally, like baked into Yardi or baked into OneSite or baked into Appfolio or whatever, where it's got a list of vendors and they have authorized vendors and authorized products they're allowed to order, right? And it's a control thing. CFOs love it, controllers love it, the number crunchers love it. But what they don't realize is that is not a free service. The companies that you're buying from on that portal are charging you closer to retail, and then
Mhm.
the middleman is creating a store of their own that they're making 15 or 20% on.
Yeah.
So you're paying that middleman for a little bit of extra transparency, but if you have any type of buying volume, you're probably lighting 5 or 6 figures on fire.
Yeah. That
That
sounds
you
like
can
a
hire
business.
somebody and have a job in your office and
Mhm.
somebody doing that and watching out for your best interests instead of just a computer system pushing papers and then giving up 20% of your margin.
Are you able to, when you're doing your proposals, show what your cost is and how basically they're gonna recoup not only your cost, but there's gonna be an ROI on what they pay you by what
So
they're
that's what
paying
I
the
do,
owner?
yeah. When I do the contract, they'll have an option A, 2,500 bucks, here's this. If you wanna
Mhm.
do A plus one, 1,000 bucks a month, you can call me, and I will help you work through issues or answer questions or whatever. Option B is I'll do all the spec work and all that stuff and help you negotiate with your vendors. And then option C is I will negotiate with your vendors for you
Mhm.
and help you establish the accounts and the pricing and the specs and the other stuff for either the project or for the company based on the size of what you're doing and what you're looking for. And then help you rack and stack all of those payoffs between my fee, between what you're going to save on the product, between what you're going to save over time and NOI generation, asset value to the property, and all that stuff. So I track all my numbers now. I calculate at about a six cap because I do a lot of C and D stuff, but I also do some nicer B&A stuff. I do some mixed use renos and stuff. So when I calculate out what I save people, it's since 2019, I've helped generate whatever. I haven't done the math on,
On your LinkedIn tagline, I think it's like
yeah,
40,000,000
6.5 million and 100 million in asset value.
there. Yeah,
So
I so for the active investor listening, for the multifamily operator listening, I like when you're able to kind of show your expertise so they know before they call, like they've had in their ear. Can you describe the TCO method for that listener? But I also want to address the listener who's not ever going to hire you as a consultant for multifamily because they're more passive investors. What you do to help that passive investor basically learn more, ask better questions, find better operators. Would love to hear about how that factors into what you do.
yeah, what I do for the active operator, the TCO method, which stands for total cost of ownership. And it's basically just looking at every aspect when procurement, right? I used to say procurement and it used to be in my company name. And then I DBA'd because nobody, people don't know what the hell it is
Yeah.
or why. So I stopped. I just don't talk about, I talk about it, but I don't
You
like
call
make
it
it part of my
that.
branding anymore because it did not go well because nobody knew what the hell it was. The overall picture is procurement is everything that your business needs to run. So every outside service, so it's not payroll, HR, unless it's 1099s, but every outside service should be going through some sort of procurement
Mhm.
process, right? And it's super boring. Nobody cares about the process itself. They only care about the results, right? Inputs and outputs, how it all works, contract management, all that stuff. Unfortunately, the bigger you get, the more important this becomes because it's really easy to start hemorrhaging money by just losing
Right.
sight of what the controllables are. The total cost of ownership means acquisition cost, right? Whatever that happens to be, that's your acquisition cost. And then cost to operate, maintain. So that's all your utilities, all of your repair supplies, CapEx rehabs, all of that stuff, all the labor that goes into all of it, all of your overhead and operating expenses. Everything is part of TCO, including at the end, the disposition cost. So from beginning of life to end of life, what does it cost you? It's been around since the 80s. It was an IT thing. Very predictable in IT. It is not predictable in real estate because every property, every town, every set of tenants, everything, there's too many random inputs. You can't calculate an exact total cost of ownership. The point isn't to know exactly what it costs. The point is to understand what the risk is and minimize the cost,
Mhm.
right? So when you're choosing building materials to go in, do you choose the cheapest thing you can buy, like every construction company since the dawn of time has done? Rebid process, lowest bid wins. If it falls apart on day 56, guess what? You follow the money, right? Follow the money and everything. Day 166 hits, and they don't care because the warranty was up through day 60, 365. Okay. That's construction. That's how that process works. They don't care if you tell them don't substitute this brand of appliances for this, they'll still buy the wrong brand of appliances and then you'll start dealing with appliance failures 12, 24, 36 months later.
Okay.
Don't do this. They'll do it because literally we incentivize construction companies to get the job via bid, and then we bonus the project managers based on coming in on time and under budget.
But
So not only are we using a system that's been outdated for probably 20 years because of modern technology and the ability to negotiate and transparency and all this other stuff, but now we're encouraging people to literally line their pockets at our expense as property owners. It's an awful system. It sucks
Mhm.
out loud, and it will always bite you in the ass. Can I say that on this show? Sorry.
You sure can, right?
So it's real estate.
I don't think
I've
we're
just had
FCC regulated either. So
so
SEC regulated, but not FCC regulated. So
thank God.
now, if you're gonna, when I hear you talking, it's like I'm a multifamily operator, but my expertise, like I know about this stuff, but this is not my deep area of expertise. I have a different area of expertise. So if you're talking to me or somebody out there who's maybe even in a completely different field and they want to do what Andy does, you mentioned you have a lot of books on your shelf back there. You mentioned your first book that you bought back in like 2008 or so, I don't know, seven, whatever it was, 2011. And then you talked about expert network sites where you can find people who are experts in the niche that you need. What kind of direction would you give to a new consultant to go out there and say, maybe I can do this full time?
Honestly, a lot of it comes down to how willing are you to network and
Mm.
kind of share what you're doing, and how many reps are you willing to put in to build your expertise?
Mhm.
Like for me, I didn't fall into this, but I fell into this. Like I'd always thought about consulting, but I got a bunch of certifications and stuff to make me more of an authority when I was
Mm.
talking to customers that I was selling to. And I was on the board of directors for a local home builders branch, part of the NAHB. I got 3 certifications from them. I got a USGBC certification. And so it was very much, I was niching into improving my creds, right? Because I didn't have a college degree. So for me, it was like I'm building authority. I don't need to have an MBA or a PhD to do this. I'm working with real estate people. If you say things that make sense, it's good, but having the technical back end to back up what you're saying is also good. So figure out what you want to consult on first, where you can lean into your own experience now. Like figuring out, I want to be a consultant when I want to grow up, but I don't have any practical experience with the actual thing I wanna consult on is probably a bad mix, right? That's not a path you wanna go down. If you don't have deep industry knowledge or deep experience with something where you
Mhm.
could add value just based off of your day to day or whatever it is, you probably shouldn't consult on it, right? Like,
Mhm.
I am
Yeah.
the first one to yell at people who wanna be a guru and they wanna teach people how to flip houses and be a coach and do all this other stuff and stop flipping houses after they've done like 2 deals because they really decided, "I flipped these 2 houses and it went well, but I really effing hate it and I don't wanna do it anymore. So I'm gonna teach people how to do it and I'm not gonna do it."
Yeah.
And supplant my income from point A and put it in point B, but they don't have enough reps to have actually gotten the experience to be valuable as a coach or a consultant for that because they
Yeah.
haven't seen enough things, right? Like my least favorite conversation to have is when I walk into a big multifamily office, whether it's private held,
Mhm.
whether it's a REIT, whether it's whatever. And I hear we've done it this way for 20 years.
Yeah.
That's cool. Or we always do it this way. Or
Then why am
because
I here?
it's not just that, but it's okay, so you've been working for this one company, or maybe you've had 3 jobs in the industry, right? It's not atypical to go and find a property manager who's worked for 3 different firms.
Mhm.
Okay, you've got these 3 experiences, and you've got these 3 windows into how these companies did business, and maybe you stole good ideas from the first 2. I have stolen good ideas from a couple hundred.
Yeah.
And so I see these things at 10,000 feet, and I can tell you how this particular thing will end for you about 3 to 5 years from now. And again, if you're not gonna own it in 3 to 5 years, then who cares, right? But if you're gonna still hold that asset, I can pretty much like clockwork tell you how that's gonna end and be
Yes,
relative.
you're like the internet where it's like you wanna learn how to do something new and you watch videos from tons of different people and you're getting little tidbits and tips and hacks from a lot of people and you're coalescing all of that into a single project or a single method or a single skill set. And I think that's really been the game changer on the information age is just you're able to take all these ideas and steal them. Do we even have creative ideas anymore? I don't know, but being able to aggregate them all into a single path, that's really accelerated what I've been able to learn and do, and then you go and practice
Mhm,
and you add actual experience to that, and it really has a
correct.
big impact. So that's where you've come in, actually working in the field and aggregating all this. The first suggestion, actually know what you're talking about. That's a good one. And here's how you get to that point. You got to that point by working for companies. Somebody paid you to learn this basically when you were working for various companies. And then you went out and you got various certifications that are specific to what you're consulting in. And then where do you go out? I met you at a networking event where I'd already met you on LinkedIn, but we show up in person and you're there to basically talk to owners.
Everybody.
And you are a better fit to be there than I was. Like, we're looking for limited partners who want to come in and join in our fund. That's not where you find them, a conference like that, but you're there and you had hundreds of people like me, owners, there who could use your services where I was there looking for a needle in a haystack.
Yeah, and so, like I said, I wanna do this and I wanna spend the money and go. It was my first BEC, right? And I'm like, I wanna go there because I wanna see people. And actually, some of the first people I met through the Best Ever community and through LinkedIn when I got there, because I landed Saturday and I
Mhm.
landed early in the afternoon Saturday. I'm like, what the hell am I gonna do? I actually hooked up with a bunch of LPs and we hung out because they were going to the conference to find people to spend money with.
Yeah.
So I was, oh, sometimes it's just about friendships and relationships because sometimes they will refer you later,
Yeah.
or maybe they never will and it'll never be a thing, but they're good people. And like I'm connected with them on LinkedIn, and now there's a face to the name and a personal relationship that wasn't there prior.
Yeah.
That's also valuable. It's not always about the immediate payoff necessarily. Like I did manage to close a deal completely accidentally. I was not hard pitching at all while I was at the VIP table. Like I paid for the access because I wanted to be in the room with the people who were actually there,
Mhm.
seriously spending money to seriously do business at the show. So that extra 2 grand in ticket price paid for itself because that one project, even though it's not a big thing, it's a ground up development. I'm going to create a spec list for him and do all the things we talked about, but I'm not going to negotiate for him. I'm not going to buy for him. He's his own GC and project manager. He's been doing it for years. It's his first apartment complex that he's putting together. So I'm going to help
Okay.
him on that because he says 10 years to lifetime hold for all three of his upcoming projects. Like,
Okay. Do it
do I
right.
believe that? Everybody I talk to who's in the game says they're going to build this or rehab this and then they're going to hold it for 10 years to life because they're talking to me. Do they typically?
Not unless it's an opportunity,
50-50.
darling.
50-50. If there's somebody willing to buy it and they can get what they think the property is worth,
Mhm.
they'll sell it. There's a price for everything, right?
Yeah.
Timing be damned.
Well, we've had projects where we weren't sure. Yeah, I'll sell it for the right price, but we don't know. We've got one right now where we bought it out of an estate. So my partner, it was his family's owned it since the 80s. He doesn't ever want to sell it. Does that mean that he wouldn't sell it for the right price? No, but we are planning the long term on that one because he wants to basically pass it down to his own kids. And so I think that there are different considerations when you're planning out a timeline, but I like to plan for the maybe not the worst case scenario, but this could get bad. Like I could have to hold this for longer than I'm planning. And we've had that come up and bite us on one of our projects where we didn't know what we were doing on the first go around and ended up keeping it much longer than we were planning. Then we had another one that we're planning on keeping for a long time and we ended up hating it and selling it like 11 months in. So you just never really know what you're going to get. But you help people plan ahead and figure out those kinds of
To
contingencies.
minimize the pain. And
Yeah.
there's always gonna be pain, there's always gonna be issues, there's gonna be CapEx stuff. If
Mhm.
you're buying a lot of my clients still, especially family offices, will look at a property from the '40s, the '60s, the '70s and '80s, and they'll be like, "We can make that work."
Yeah.
And they'll buy the thing, and it's, "Okay, let's do all this stuff and see what happens." And their plan is always they're very a lot of family offices are not in it because they do have investors. Sometimes it's other family offices, sometimes it's their own money, sometimes it's whatever. They all use bank loans, right? So they're all in the game with Fannie and Freddie and CMBS loans and all the other stuff, all the same stuff that we talk about in this industry all the time. And they have a different approach because it's more about preservation of capital than it is about the appreciation
Mhm.
game, depreciation on taxes, right? A lot of times they don't care. It's a preservation of capital play for a
Mhm.
family office. It's not about making a 35% IRR and unloading the property. They don't care in a lot of
Mhm.
cases. Sometimes they just want to make it work and hold it. And later on down the road, they'll pay it off. But they're
Yeah.
not going for 80% LTV on every single thing so they can leverage forward. They establish they cash flow. If the property doesn't cash flow as planned and they don't see it as a preservation of capital game, then they sell it. If it's not doing what they thought it was going to do, they look back at it, they go, okay, this didn't quite go as planned.
Mhm.
Too much repair, too many failures, too much pinholing, too much whatever. And they'll just sell it and be done with it. And
Yeah.
it's a learning lesson and they move on.
Sounds like one of my buildings, which is why we use so many shark bites on that one.
Oh,
But
yes.
would you ever consider consulting, like teaching a consultant, maybe even outside your own industry to be like, hey, look, here's the long term plan. Here's how you get the expertise if they don't already have it. Usually they would. But okay, here are the places you need to go, the books you need to read, the
Sure.
contracts you have.
Yeah, I would. I'm far from the authority, right? I've only been doing it since 2019 and I
Yeah.
never stopped doing it. I'm not the guy who's going to become the guru and teach people how to be a consultant and all that stuff. It'd be cool, right? A
Yeah.
different type of contract, but I don't have 20 years of reps doing
Okay.
consulting. I have waffled through this and stumbled my way in. Probably 3 or 4 years, I was trying to figure out who my core client was. I'm
Mhm.
trying to reach out to these property management companies, and none of them want anything to do with me. What the
Mhm.
hell's going on? I can save them money on their stuff and how they buy their product. They don't care. They're not paying that bill. That bill goes out of the owner's pockets, and their job is not to generate NOI. Their job is to lease it up and keep it running. They don't care. If the owner wants to defer maintenance, great. They don't care. They're getting paid either way.
Yeah, yeah. That's a good point, like, knowing who you're selling to, knowing what you're doing, and then what you just said is, like, you gotta know what you're doing before you can consult on something, and so until you become, like, an expert diehard consultant, but you can help someone who's just a few steps behind you. That's my thing. It's like you don't have to know everything. You just have to know more than the person who's hiring you, and you have to
Right.
charge the commensurate amount of what that so
Correct.
you
Yeah,
know,
like I couldn't charge somebody 50 grand to coach them on consulting. I'm not that guy. If you
Mhm.
wanna pay that, go to Tony Robbins or
Yeah.
somebody like that. That's not me. Probably never will be because it's not really I like consulting, but it's not the
Mhm.
consulting I like. I like, the education, the
Mhm.
relationship building, and because I'm still in real estate, I like going and walking properties and seeing nightmare stories and hearing crazy stuff that happened and being in the trenches with people as they decide how they're gonna gut stuff. And I like pretty things. I like high design and I like really nice architecture and really old buildings being brought back to life. Like that stuff is fun for me.
Yeah.
Not a lot of people understand it, but I guess you gotta be a building material sales guy for 20 years to
Yeah.
really
But we're
figure
all
that out.
suckers for a good before and after.
Yeah.
Tell me about what's coming up for you though, because when you mentioned several things, like you're trying to make some long-term plans for your own family, your personal passive income journey. You have a point where you have I don't want to say you have a hands-off business, but where you have a lot of time flexibility and
Mhm.
you're able to start thinking about, okay, what do I want to do without thinking about what my boss wants me to do? Kind of paint the next 5 years out for us.
Yeah, absolutely. So I obviously started this before the pandemic. During the pandemic, it was a godsend because she's working a W-2. I can make my hours flexible. I can
Yeah.
drive kids places, pick kids up, do the thing. And I still do that today. My son's in the local public school for now. We'll put him in private school when the time comes. Once, like, the high school here is not great. We'd love to be down in Tennessee before that happens. Is that real? I don't know. Like, her parents are 70. They live 8 houses down from us. Is that going to be a thing for me? Yeah, maybe. I don't know. This house is paid off. I don't have a mortgage. I have a lot of taxes I pay every month, but
Mhm.
I don't have a mortgage. So
That's
there's a little
already
bit of freedom there to just do what I want to do and
yeah.
not really sweat the small stuff. So for me, if I'm super busy and I've got 3 or 4 projects going on and 4 or 5 different people that are paying me retainers, I'm on the phone several hours a week. I can do those while I walk. I can do those while I'm in the car to drop him off or pick him up, right? There's a lot of time freedom that's been generated from doing the consulting thing because I can pick who I work for, what projects I want to take on. Like that stuff is pretty sweet. Like at Home Depot, telling no to somebody who wanted to spend money with us, even if they were a terrible customer who was just
Mhm.
gonna be a complete pain in the butt, was not really an option. If the money
Yeah.
was green, you took it, right?
Right.
Now, the money can be green, but it really can be red because of the amount of time I gotta spend dealing with
Yeah.
this stupidity.
Yeah.
So I pick and choose a lot. I cherry pick the projects I work on. And I've been yelled at for that. I'm going to have a podcast episode coming out in a week or so that I spent like an hour with Ryan Pineda. And he basically, you have all this knowledge and all this stuff, and you don't have a way to monetize it, and you're stupid. Well,
I've heard the same thing.
very rude.
I don't wanna do the marketing behind it. I don't like launching products that fail. And most entrepreneurs, they don't care. They'll go out, they'll launch something. If it fails, they just launch the next thing. But for me, I take it personally. So I have a really hard time like putting it out, trying to figure out how to monetize everything. No, like today I was supposed to a solo podcast episode, but instead my daughter asked if I wanted to go hiking with her. So no podcast, we go hiking. That's
Yeah.
what's important, that kind of
Yep.
stuff. Not that I'm not going to record that episode. It's just I don't wanna put a product out there, hustle, monetize everything and all that. This is a lifestyle that we're trying to create, and it sounds like you're in the same boat. You choose who you work with, you choose what projects are interesting, you choose what you're gonna monetize, and it's not all about money and hustle.
And he actually told me I was being selfish because I wasn't
I
monetizing because I
hear that
had the
all the
knowledge and I
time.
picked and chose who I worked with. You're being selfish because you have all this stuff that could help people and save people money and you don't have to work with them directly. You can just monetize it. I'm like, I don't want to be a guru, Ryan. That's not me. Like,
Somebody who doesn't want what I'm selling is considered, like, stupid because I'm putting that out there and I'm being unselfish by selling them this project, and now that because they don't want it or they choose not to buy it, suddenly they're being stupid. People are like, "You're being selfish if you keep it together." Alex Hormozy says this all the time too, and I'm like, "Yes, I get it, that if you aren't willing to do what it takes to help as many people as possible, then you are being selfish. But at the same time, it's like sometimes people just not enough people want it to make it worth that hustle. I don't know. I struggle with this because people are like, "Oh, you should sell this or you should sell that." And I'm like, I've sold a lot of things over the years that didn't go anywhere.
Yeah, and I'm less worried about that side of it. If I create it and I put the time into it and it flops, then okay. Like, it is what it is, but it's what I'm doing now anyway, so am I
Mhm.
really spending any extra time? Yeah, it takes time to assemble it, it takes time to clean it up, make it into a product as opposed to being involved, but at some point, I'm gonna need to do something because if I don't work, I don't eat.
Yeah.
I need something that'll make me money while I sleep, and yes, I'm investing in real estate, and that is my making money while I sleep part,
Mhm.
but and hard money lending is great. First position lien, 10, 12, 14. Actually, it's all 12 and 14 plus now at this point, and I think my last 10% loan from a few years back came back to me, so I have to find a home for that money at some point here in the next.
Hey, we can
Yeah,
help you out there.
maybe. I'm open to it.
We'll
I'm
do
open
all the
to it.
work for you.
Yeah, I like that part of it.
Especially for an IRA, you have to let us do all the work for you. There are rules, right? Like, we're
There
rule
are,
followers,
yes, I
Andy.
hands off, gotta be hands off.
Why Tennessee? Just lower taxes or
Partially lower taxes, partially still Four Seasons.
eh?
We really like Four Seasons. We do a lot of camping up in the Adirondacks here in the summertime.
Mhm.
My son's a Boy Scout, so we do all of those trips. He does a couple of other things, but we've always been campers, like, since the day he was like, we skipped in the last since he's been alive, 11 years, we've skipped 1 year of camping, and it was when he was an infant.
Yeah,
His first camping trip, he was a year and a half, and it was 10 days up in the Adirondacks in a tent, and we have always taken him tenting, and we will not put him in a camper until he's probably 16,
yeah,
17, when all of that experience and just suffering through being in a tent during rainstorms, windstorms, crazy cold 40-degree nights, like, we want him to sweat and learn the
yeah,
real deal. Then we can cush out, which will be fine because 'cause I'll be in my 50s at that point, and I'll
yeah.
probably wanna be cushy anyway. I won't wanna screw around with tents at that point in my life. Or maybe I will. Maybe I'll be just as crazy then as I am now. I don't know.
It's all about having options. When we first moved into our RV, our kids were about that age. I think they're like 11, 15, 17. But we'd been living in a tent for 3 months at that point. We hiked across Arizona, and when they got into the camper, they were like, "This is so much better. This is so nice." But after about 3 months in the camper, they were like, "Okay, I can we go back to our house, please?" It's all relative, and so you just wanna get into a place that's maybe a little warmer, a little less
A little bit
taxes.
warmer. Obviously, the taxes are nice. I do eventually wanna roll the vast majority of what we have in self-directed IRAs over to Roths, but I
Okay.
don't want to pay New York State 5 to 8% for the pleasure of living here. I'm good
Sure.
on that, so I need to spend at least 6 months in a day in Tennessee before I pull that trigger.
Okay.
So that's another part of it, right? Is just not hemorrhaging dollars. But it's also, I think, New York State, for every dollar you spend in New York State, it really only carries 84 cents of value. But in
Mhm.
Tennessee, every dollar you spend, it's like a buck 10.
Okay.
So just cost of
So cost of
living,
living.
general experience. Plus, we're really looking hard on the east side of Tennessee, like in the Knoxville area. So there's a lot of good investing there. There's a lot of larger investors who are successful there that I've got relation with Gino Barbaro. He's purchased in the last 12 months like 660 doors
Yeah,
in Knoxville and around Knoxville, Maryville area.
nice.
And so he's like a big proponent of that market too, even though he's living in Florida in St. Augustine. We're not going to go down that road right now.
Yeah.
Jake is still in Tennessee, but Gino is not.
We
So,
we spent 3 months in St. Augustine. My kids call it Tickville.
ew,
Tired of the
that's
ticks. They
unpleasant.
Yeah, they got to choose where they lived, and I guess for the listener who's still listening, if you're still here, like, this is where stuff gets interesting because it's like the why behind why we do things, like, why we want what we want and why we're willing to work hard at what we're doing. Because if you don't find a really good reason why you're doing this, it makes it really hard to stay motivated. If you There's a lot of uncertainty, there's a lot of hard work without knowing if you're gonna ever get paid for it, and so you really have to have these kind of dreams that you're building, which is why I always ask the guest about these kinds of things because it's so important to identify with what we're talking about because you're not going to live in a tent for 3 months like I did. You're like, I just disregard what I say. But as we bring on different guests, you all have different stories about what you're going for and what you want. And listeners really connect with that. And it helps that powerful reason why it helps you get through the hard times because we sometimes we're podcasting just paint this, oh, if you do this 100% of the time, everything's going to be pretty and smooth. And it's just not.
No, I'm not selling anything. Hi. Most
Yeah.
people listening, it's not going to help you. Now, if you're an LP, right? We asked about the LP part of what I do and how that matters. Find people looking for ways that are going to increase value without adding a dog park and without adding rubs. Like rubs are great. They make good money until you're in a situation now where the top 40 markets in the country can't increase rent. So you can't charge rubs. You can't increase rent.
No more
How do you
pet
save
fees.
money?
We're done
You
with pet fees because the ESAs, they're like, we're not even if we can charge, but we still charge pet fees, but our pet fee income is way, way down because most people who have animals on the property. It's an ESA now. So it's like
yep,
those kinds
because
of things dry up.
they're not real ESAs. So I can go down the
Yeah,
road of ESAs because there is a website now. I don't remember the name of it off the top of my head, but you can
ESA
find it through
dot
Google.
dot net.
They vet the ESAs that come
Mhm,
through because part of the way the law is written for ESAs is that the person has to be working regularly with a shrink and they have to have something going on up
mhm.
here that makes them require an ESA. So they have to be a Looney Tune in some way, some fashion. But they can't like only work with a guy once
Mhm.
and then get an ESA. It's supposed
Okay.
to There's supposed to be an established relationship, but now there's all these farms selling it for 75 to $300
I
where you can
know.
just say you get one face-to-face visit and you get an ESA. Now there's a website out there that knows all of those websites
Mm,
and will actually tell you whether it's valid or not, and then you can choose whether or not you wanna fight the human rights violation in your local courts to get the ESA overturned or for most people, I'm gonna say it's not worth the fight, but I do know some people have done it and won. There's a little bit of give and take there, and I think if people get loud enough about those farm sites, it'll be just like the same places, the fraud cases for fake pay stubs, fake W-2s, fake this, fake that are going into all of the applications for living in these units and all the fraud and all the uncollectible money. Like, all of that stuff happens because someone gets an idea to sell it on the internet super cheap, and there's no actual legitimacy behind it, and it catches up to them eventually. So, I think we're gonna see more of that with the current administration, where maybe they'll be willing to crack down on the ESA because it's becoming a fraud issue. Like, literally, you're supposed to have 3 to 6 months of regular visits with a shrink before you're prescribed an ESA.
no,
That's the way the law is written.
1, maybe
So,
2.
if that. I don't even think
Mhm.
they do 2. I think it's 1 visit, it's 15. Yes,
Some
you're a Fruit
psychiatrists.
Loop, have a dog. You're
Yeah,
crazy, have a dog.
yeah.
And for me,
Some
as a property owner, I look at that and I go, "Do I really want mentally disturbed people in my property?"
discriminate based on that. It's
That's why
very
I invest in storage.
yeah.
I can absolutely discriminate. You
That's
wanna live in my storage unit, you're gonna have problems.
yeah, that's a different thing there, but I think what you're talking about with the LP doesn't have to do it, but they should know enough about these kinds of things so that they
Right.
know if their operator is doing it. Like, when you're looking at a pro forma and it shows a big increase in, say, pet rent or rubs, and you're like, yeah, I think the ship is still on that one, that's on the peak." But you're always gonna be able to save money on power and
There's
water
all sorts
and
of stuff you can
all
do.
sorts of stuff.
And labor, like,
Yeah,
so many people hemorrhage money in overhead and labor and don't
yeah,
realize what it costs.
yeah,
Like,
and it's
utilities are great.
how can people get a hold of you after the show? People who wanna hire you as a consultant or people who wanna listen to your podcast, what's the best way to go about those things?
So for the podcast, it's the TCO method. So you just go to tcomethod.com or you can just search for the TCO method on Google or any other platform and it shows up. For me, you can, if you want to hire me, the website for the business is ARM Companies, ARM companies.com. You can see stuff there. I'm going to have some case studies like they're done. They're not up because I wanted to do like a lead capture form and I just haven't done it. So yeah, but
Technical
if you
stuff.
want case studies, I've
Yeah.
got a bunch written. You can have them. I'll email them to you. Just send it to me. So it's Andy at armcompanies.com. And if you just Google my name with the correct spelling, like,
Yeah.
I come up on, like, the first 6 pages of Google, like, I'm my website, my personal branding website is, like, the very first hit, even though it hasn't been updated since the pandemic, because I'm often
Does it make
sending
you look
things.
younger than you really are? Because
No, it's
okay,
no,
then you're
I'm
okay.
not
You
that
don't need
guy,
it.
like, my
Then you don't
LinkedIn
feel great.
picture should have
There you go.
relatively matched what you actually get. I'm not into the post a 20-year-old picture.
It happens. Sadly, it happens.
Oh,
I
it's
don't want
one of
people
my
to
pet
meet me in
peeves.
real life and be
I
like,
don't like it.
"What?"
It's one of my pet peeves. Yeah, no, I'm good. Yeah, actually, you mentioned it's funny. Somebody was in the VIP room, and I did not recognize him because of the picture on LinkedIn. He was 20 pounds heavier and had brown hair, and he lost 20 pounds and now has gray hair and
Yep.
hasn't updated his picture. And I was like, "Oh, I know who you are."
That name sounds familiar. Spell your name out for those who are not watching the video podcast on Spotify or YouTube, who are maybe just listening on
It
iTunes. Which, by the way, we
absolutely.
have a video on Spotify and YouTube. But so you're gonna spell it out.
Yes, it is McQuade, the only
Good.
correct spelling of McQuade.
There you go. And you post great content on LinkedIn. So go and follow
Sometimes.
him on LinkedIn. It's educational, helpful. You have a no nonsense style that I really enjoy. So I appreciate you putting it out there and taking the time because you're selling consulting, but at the same time, most of the people who consume our content are not going to hire us or invest with us or whatever. And maybe it's not so selfish to put out so much free content. We're helping people and we don't have to squeeze every monetization drop out of everything that we do. I
Absolutely. If people wanna do what I do, they can listen to the podcast for free. They're just gonna invest a
exactly.
lot of time doing it.
Exactly.
Like,
Yeah.
they're gonna pay for it somehow. What's your
Yeah.
time worth?
Podcasts will like spill all the secrets because you got to come up
Yeah,
with content, especially long form. It's like an hour and a half and you got to keep coming up with stuff to talk to. So when you can get through it at 1.5x, I mean, there's a lot of free information in there.
there sure is.
Awesome. All right.
I
Thanks
sound
so
like a
much.
Smurf at 1.5 though. I don't like
Yeah.
sounding like a Smurf. That makes me sad.
People, when they meet me in real life, they're like, you talk slower. I'm like, I talk really fast. So if you can listen to me on 1.5x, you're doing pretty well.
It's pretty
All
awesome.
right. So if you want to reach out to me, partnerwithrise.com/Emma, free 30-minute call if you'd like to invest with me. Same thing, partnerwithrise.com, and you can just jump on, see what we got. Hard money loans. We can help you out, Andy, just in case you're looking for something. Salt Lake City area. If you're going to be in the area in Rochester, New York, maybe you can take him out for a 3.5 hour coffee and
Come hang out at my RIA meetings. We
well,
only do 20 a month or something.
I know. Goodness. That's the same thing. We have 3 RIAs here. My partner owns the Utah RIA, and I feel like I'm at so many. So if you're ever in Salt Lake City, you want to meet up, tell me what RIA meeting you're going to, and I'll be there. All right. We'll talk to y'all soon. I'm really looking forward to just helping you figure out what your next passive income adventure is and how to pay for it, because that's what I'm passionate about. You spending time with your family and working on the things that really matter, both personally and professionally. So that describes you. Would love to have a conversation. Till next
Thanks
time.
so much.